Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video. And today it's time to paint some more Skaven. That's right, we're back on that army project. In fact, today it's time for the ultimate Skaven, the Grey Seer. Let's get into it.
The strict technomancer that is Vinci V. Let us get to the technique and learn it, Vinci V.
That's right, I'm still continuing my army project with Skaven, and now it's time for one of my favorite figures, the Grey Seer. I'm also continuing to kick John Ninus's butt in the progress on this. He's so far back in the dirt I can't even see him anymore. Now, the Grey Seer is mostly made of components I've already covered before, but there are a couple of different elements of this guy that I haven't touched I want to talk about because I think they're both relevant, especially as we are dealing with a very unique figure in the army. So first is we're going to talk a little bit about gray skin and what that looks like and how to make it interesting. And then we're going to talk about the fun of like Skaven tails and noses and things like that. The two are actually more related than you think. So let's head over to the desk. Let's get painting. All right, first up, let's start with the skin. Now, with the skin, it's called the Grey Seer, but we're not going to work simply in gray. That is to say, some midway point between black and white. That is a fast train to Boring Town. No, instead, we're going to use grays that have colors infused in them. By colors, I just mean hues, real colors, something on the color wheel. And so we're going to start with a little red-gray base coat. In fact, most of this is actually pretty simple. We're going to use red-gray, green-gray, and then just a little bit of bright ivory. That's the closest to actual white we'll get, and that's safe for the end. So I start by just getting a good base coat over the face and the skin of the red-gray color. Now this, you can see, has that nice warm red infusion that we want. It's going to provide us with a good base tone. We will still be doing some more later, but you'll see how that all works out. This just gives me something nice and dark to build up from and work from. From this point, I make about 5 or so different mixes total between with this and the green-gray. So for simplicity's sake, let's say a 25-75, a 50-50, a 75-25, and then a pure green-gray. Again, is it exactly that? No, this isn't chemistry, okay? But it's close enough. The point is I make several progressive steps. And what I then begin doing is just layering up the face. Now, an important note about animalistic faces, so things with long noses as opposed to human faces, is that they have a lot more surface area that is parallel to the ground, i.e. pointing upwards, as opposed to perpendicular to the ground, like our faces. And so as a result, you have a lot more brightness up top on a long sort of conical shape. You want to make sure when you've got recesses up there that you don't leave them too dark. Now, as the recesses go along the sides and are more perpendicular, that's where they stay dark. But when they're upward facing, we don't want to push too far. Okay, so what I do is just layer up, focusing again towards the top of that plane. Now, one of the things I'll often see people do is they'll leave deep shadows on some part of that upward facing plane. So like, in other words, they'll have, you know, a flat part of a head, of an animalistic head, and they'll make it like a really deep shadow coming out to a bright light. You don't want to do that. All of that plane is facing upward, so we're going to have very minimal tonal variation. In fact, as I'm working my way up this chain on those big flat areas, I really keep overpainting the entire area. And it's on the sides, on the perpendicular places, the cheeks, the nose, on the arms, and in the lower area of the arms, in those kinds of things. That's where you see me hiding the shadows. We're going to bring more light to the face, to the knuckles, to those upward-facing planes, really trying to focus the light, building up to that pure green-gray. And it does take me a while. I'm working fairly thin. That's my next tip for working with these lighter colors. Number 1 is infuse hues. Number 2 is work thin. It's worth it, especially, like, you're not going to probably paint a ton of things like this. If you do, then something like the airbrush might be your friend, or we can talk about other army painting strategies, but for a single model, working thinner and doing more layers, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these thin layers, is really a better way to go. It prevents any kind of chalkiness with the paint, which is already minimal because we're using these color-infused paints, but it also just helps you establish right away a nice, smooth transition between all these layers. So as you're laying down the shingles on a roof, the progression remains very smooth, very easy, and then you don't have to go back and try to do a lot of glazing later. So I work my way all the way up to that green-gray, and then I'm in a good place. Now, that's when I start bringing in the near white. So I'm working here with like basically a bright ivory, something that's close to white but not actual dead white. I almost never use actual dead white. And that's when I start highlighting and picking out the differences on the volumes up top. I start with just mixing in a little bit of it and then into my green gray, and then go to a pure, just very, very tiny amounts of the pure bright ivory. And that's the color variation that I'm going for on those purely upward facing planes, right? Just a little bit in between the white and the green gray. Not a huge jump. Enough there that we see there's some change, but it's minimal because that entire plane is facing up toward the light, and so would respect that zenithal accordingly. Okay, I do a few glazes of sort of a shadow color here and there, like midtones, just to smooth everything out. No matter how smooth you are with layering, you will still have a little bit, so I just touch that up real quick. Not a big deal. You've seen me do like minimal thin glazes of previous steps in basically every video I've ever done. Now it's time to talk about how we actually bring the visual interest to this project, okay? Right now, it's cool. It has some color. We've got a little bit of red infused in the shadows. We got a little bit of green infused in the highlights. That's good. That's good, but it's not enough. We can do better. So now I'm going to get out my topaz skin from the Army Painter. It's just a deep pinky skin color. You can use any kind of pinky skin color, but this is the one I picked. It really doesn't matter. And I'm going to work that. We're going to use this in two primary ways. So the first is on this skin we've already done. Let's get into that. And the second is going to be to get over to the tail and all the other pinky parts. We'll get there. So I work it down into a very thin filter. Now, when I say a filter, I mean even thinner than a glaze. So now we're talking about 3, 4, 5 drops of water to 1 drop of paint, maybe a little more. This is really thin. This is dirty paint water. And once I have it thinned down that far, I then go ahead and softly begin glazing that from basically the mid-tone area down into the shadows. So around his muzzle, in his cheeks, inside the ears, in his, what would it be here? Like his elbow area, his bend of his arm, whatever. Okay. That's where I'm focusing that very slight glaze. It will not have a huge effect. But what it does is it infuses that area with more of that soft red tone, and humans read red as alive. We have a very strong subconscious bias to look at red tones and say, that's a living thing. And so by infusing this very gently through the filter, we really do bring the Skaven to life. And so that's what we're doing here with that simple glaze. Now, I want that to connect out to the other parts of the miniature we're going to do here, which is like the tail, the nose, and so on. And the reason for that is because I want there to be harmony in between his tail, which is skin with no fur on it, theoretically, or something, and his what's in his skin. That's why I'm bringing some of that same red into the skin, because there I want a little bit of that impression that the underskin, that pinky skin that's underneath that, is showing through. So we want to create that harmony. So I then take the topaz skin, and now we're going to do like his nose, inside his mouth, inside his ear, touch the cheeky cheeks a little bit, and importantly, we're going to base coat the whole tail with it. Okay, so once that's all done, let's talk about how we build up a Skaven tail. So this is my methodology for Skaven tails. You don't actually need to go super far. They're fun and fast and actually pretty cool and easy to paint. So here we go. You take the topaz skin, we base coat the whole tail. Easy. You've done that. We were there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of that green gray or the bright ivory or anything like that, something brighter and in the white-ish spectrum. And again, could be anything. And we're going to mix that in very lightly. Like this is 4-to-1 topaz to the white, right? So it's very minimal infusion. And then I'm going to cover, the tail is basically a big cylinder. So I'm just going to cover like the top half of the entire tail. So if the tail is a 360 degree, I cover 180 degrees of it. Work my way all the way along the tail. Infuse a little more of my lighter color, cover a little bit less. Now we cover the top 90 degrees or 120. Infuse a little bit more, do the same. Okay, and then final step, I focus in on only the areas that are most facing the light. So I've been covering less and less across the tail, horizontally, but I've also been covering less and less on the tail vertically along its length. So as I get to brighter and brighter tones, I cover less and less in 2 different dimensions. What I mean by this is I'm only now at those highest highlights wanting to hit the areas that are facing directly upward. So if his tail has a little twisty twist to it, whatever the thing is, the plane that's facing directly up, that's what gets hit. As it twists away from the light, I'll just kind of edge highlight the very top of each little segment. Very quick, very easy. I know this sounds complicated to explain or do, but it's really not. Honest answer, this takes a few minutes. It is the easiest part of the whole Skaven thing. Okay, like I've done all my Skaven this way. It really isn't time consuming. So now you already have a nice light progression. Okay? All right, but it's fairly bright. And we want the tail to stand out and be a little bit different. By the way, with the nose and things like that, I also put a little bit of highlight on the nose. So my next step is I take a brush that is wet. Like I dip it in water first, touch it to a paper towel to remove the excess liquid, and then I dip it into some Berserker blood shade, which you could use like Carrionburg Crimson or any kind of red wash. This is one of the few times I actually really like a wash's effect. And so it's thinned down. I then take that and run it all along the length of the tail, right? So I make sure that the entire tail is covered, no pooling, make sure that it runs into the resources, but otherwise it's just filtering and tinting the whole tail. You do have to be a little careful here, especially if you're near like white robes or some other bright part of your miniature. You don't want it to run all over the place, but a nice, careful, clean, complete application. With that on there, I just let that dry, let it sit, and when it's done, if there's little like bumps or something on the tail, I'll go back in and just give those little dots. But all in all, that's it. You're good to go. So that's really the skin and the gray of it. We've now got an interesting gray skin tone. We've got a pinky rat tail. We're ready to go. The rest of this figure is all stuff you've seen in previous videos, so check out everything else in this series if you want to see that, like how I did the red and the white and the wood and the copper and all those things I've talked about before. So, at any rate, here's how he came out when he was all done. I think he looks pretty cool. Really pleased with this guy. I think he's going to make an excellent leader for the Force, though clearly not one of the biggest models in there. He's still a very potent little guy. So, thank you so much for watching this. If you liked this, give it a like. Subscribe for additional hobby cheating. We have new content here every Saturday. If you've got any questions, drop those down below. I always answer every question asked. If you want to support the channel and help me continue to make videos like this, lots of ways you can do so. There is our merch store down below. There is, of course, our affiliate links. Those don't cost you anything extra. In fact, they often save you money. So if you need to pick up your hobby supplies, it really is a great way to help the channel. There's also the games I make with Uncle Adam listed down there, and of course our Patreon, focused on review and feedback and taking your next step on your hobby journey. We'd love to have you as part of the community. As always though, I thank you so much for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.